Key West, Florida, a young boy named Robert Eugene Otto receives a gift that will haunt his family for over a century. It's a handmade doll dressed in a sailor suit, with button eyes and a slightly unsettling expression. The boy names it Robert, after himself. Within weeks, strange things start happening in the Otto household. Furniture moves on its own. Objects are destroyed. Neighbors report seeing the doll moving from window to window when the family is out. And young Gene Otto insists that Robert the doll is alive, that he talks to him, that he causes mischief, that he's responsible for every bad thing that happens. Gene's parents think it's just childhood imagination. But as the years pass and the incidents escalate, they're not so sure. Gene Otto would keep Robert the doll for his entire life, well into adulthood, treating it like a living companion. And decades later, that doll would inspire one of the most iconic horror franchises in cinema history, Child's Play and the killer doll Chucky. But here's the thing, Robert the doll still exists today. He sits in a museum in Key West, behind glass, surrounded by letters from people begging him to lift the curses he's placed on them. This is the true story behind Chucky, and it's somehow more disturbing than the movies. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're redoing something different, a deep dive into one of the most famous haunted objects in America, and the horror franchise it inspired. We're talking about Robert the doll and Child's Play. This is going to be a long one, so buckle up. We're covering the complete history of Robert the doll from 1904 to today, the paranormal incidents, the curses, Gene Otto's bizarre life with the doll, how it inspired Chucky, the differences between the real story and the movies, and whether any of this is actually real or just an incredibly successful piece of folklore. Let's get into it. Part 1. The Origin. Key West, 1904. Our story begins in Key West, Florida, at the turn of the 20th century. The Otto family was wealthy and prominent in Key West society. Thomas Otto was a successful businessman. His wife Minnie ran the household with the help of several servants. And in 1900, they had a son, Robert Eugene Otto, who everyone called Gene. The family lived in a large Victorian mansion called the Artist House on Eaton Street, a beautiful home that still stands today and operates as a bed and breakfast. According to legend, one of the family's servants was a Bahamian woman who practiced voodoo and black magic. The Otto family supposedly mistreated her. We don't know the specific details, but employment conditions for servants, especially people of color in turn-of-the-century Florida, were often harsh. This servant, angry at her treatment, decided to take revenge in a very specific way. In 1904, she created a handmade doll for young Gene Otto. The doll was about 3 feet tall, stuffed with wood, wool and straw, with button eyes, human hair, and dressed in a white sailor suit and cap. She gave it to Gene as a gift. Now here's where the story gets murky. Some versions say the servant cursed the doll with voodoo before giving it to Gene. Others say she simply made the doll and the curse came from Gene's own attachment to it, creating some kind of psychic energy. And skeptics, of course, say there was never any curse at all, and that everything that followed was coincidence and imagination. But whatever the truth, from the moment Gene received that doll, strange things started happening in the Otto household. Gene immediately became obsessed with the doll. He named it Robert, giving it his own first name, which is psychologically interesting. He dressed it in his old sailor suit. He insisted that Robert had his own personality, his own likes and dislikes. Gene would talk to Robert for hours, and according to his parents and the servants, they would hear 2 distinct voices coming from Gene's room, Gene's voice and another voice, deeper and raspier, that seemed to belong to the doll. The incidents started small. Objects would go missing and reappear in different places. Gene's toys would be found broken or destroyed. But Gene always had the same explanation: Robert did it. His parents initially dismissed this as a child making excuses, but then they started witnessing things they couldn't explain. Servants reported seeing the doll move on its own. They would place it in one position and return to find it in another. They claimed to hear giggling coming from empty rooms. Neighbors reported seeing the doll move from window to window in the Otto house when the family was away. One neighbor swore she saw the doll running across the lawn. Family friends who visited the house reported feeling uneasy around Robert, as if the doll was watching them with malevolent intent. Gene's parents became increasingly disturbed by their son's relationship with the doll. Gene would throw tantrums if Robert was taken away or moved. He insisted that Robert was alive and needed to be respected. He set a place for Robert at the dinner table. He would have conversations with the doll, asking it questions and pausing as if listening to responses. This went on for years. As Jean got older, his attachment to Robert didn't fade, it intensified. Most children outgrow their toys, but Jean, even as a teenager and young adult, kept Robert with him constantly. His parents eventually locked the doll in the attic, hoping that out of sight would mean out of mind. But according to legend, the disturbances only got worse. The attic would be filled with the sound of footsteps and maniacal laughter. Objects in the house would fly through the air. The family dog refused to go near the attic stairs. Part 2. Eugene Otto's life with Robert Eugene Otto grew up to become an artist. He studied fine art in Chicago, Paris, and New York. He became a notable painter and author. In 1930, he married Annette Parker, and they returned to Key West to live in the family home on Eaton Street, the same house where Jean had grown up with Robert the doll. And here's where things get really strange. Jean brought Robert out of the attic and back into his life. Annette Otto was reportedly horrified by her husband's relationship with the doll. Jean kept Robert in the turret room on the 3rd floor of the house, a room with windows on all sides. He furnished the room specifically for Robert, with a child-sized rocking chair and toys. He would spend hours up there talking to the doll, and Annette would hear that same second voice that Jean's parents had heard decades earlier, a raspy, mocking voice that didn't sound like her husband. Annette tried multiple times to get rid of Robert. She wanted to throw him away, donate him, burn him, but Jean refused. He became agitated and defensive whenever Annette suggested removing the doll. He insisted Robert was a member of the family. According to some accounts, Jean even blamed Robert when things went wrong in his marriage or his career. If a painting didn't sell, Robert was jealous. If Jean and Annette fought, Robert was stirring up trouble. Neighbors in Key West during this period reported increasingly strange occurrences. Children walking past the Otto house claimed to see Robert moving in the turret window, waving at them, making faces, even tapping on the glass. Parents told their children to cross the street rather than walk past the Otto house because Robert the doll frightened them. The legend was growing. Eugene Otto died in 1972 at the age of 72. Annette donated Robert to the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West in 1994, 22 years after her husband's death. She had kept the doll locked away all those years, but she didn't want to destroy it. Maybe she was afraid of what would happen if she did. Or maybe she just wanted the doll out of her life, but preserved for posterity. Either way, Robert the doll was about to become even more famous. When Robert arrived at Fort East Martello Museum, he was just another curiosity, a weird old doll with an interesting backstory. The museum staff placed him in a glass case as part of an exhibit about Key West history. But very quickly, something strange started happening. Museum staff and visitors began reporting unusual experiences around Robert. Cameras and electronic devices would malfunction near Robert's case. Fresh batteries would die instantly. Digital cameras would shut off. Video cameras would stop working. Staff members reported feeling watched, feeling sudden drops in temperature near the exhibit, hearing giggling or footsteps when the museum was closed. Some visitors reported feeling physically ill or dizzy when standing near Robert. Children would start crying uncontrollably. But the most famous aspect of the Robert legend in the modern era is the curse and the letters. Museum visitors who mocked Robert, took photos without asking permission, or showed him disrespect, reportedly began experiencing terrible misfortunes shortly after leaving Key West. Car accidents, job losses, illnesses, relationship breakdowns, deaths in the family. These people, convinced they had been cursed by Robert, began writing letters to the museum begging for forgiveness. The museum now displays hundreds of these letters on the walls surrounding Robert's case. They're heartbreaking and terrifying in equal measure. Dear Robert, I'm sorry I made fun of you. Ever since I left Key West, everything has gone wrong. Please forgive me. Robert, I know I shouldn't have taken a photo without permission. My car broke down on the way home and I lost my job the next week. I'm begging you to lift the curse. Some letters include gifts, candy, toys, money offerings to appease the doll. The museum established a protocol. Visitors who want to photograph Robert must ask his permission out loud. If you feel like he is saying yes through intuition or a feeling, you can take the photo. If you feel resistance or negativity, you shouldn't. Museum staff will tell you that Robert tilts his head if he is in a good mood, and you can photograph him. But if he's facing forward with a stern expression, you should leave him alone. This sounds absurd until you read the letters. Skeptics dismiss them as people looking for something to blame for normal life problems. Believers see them as evidence that Robert is genuinely cursed. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in between. Part 4. The Child's Play Connection. So how did Robert the Doll inspire Chucky and the Child's Play franchise? The connection isn't officially confirmed by the filmmakers, but the parallels are obvious. Child's Play was released in 1988, decades after Robert had become famous in Key West. The movie tells the story of a serial killer named Charles Lee Ray who uses voodoo to transfer his soul into a good guy doll named Chucky. The doll comes to life and begins killing people. The similarities are striking. Both involve dolls that are allegedly alive and malevolent. Both have connections to voodoo. Both involve a doll that moves, talks, and causes harm. Robert wears a sailor suit. Chucky wears overalls. Robert has a creepy, slightly menacing expression. So does Chucky. Both are kept in rooms at the top of houses. Gene kept Robert in the turret. Andy keeps Chucky in his bedroom. And both have become iconic symbols of haunted dolls in popular culture. The key difference is that Chucky is explicitly a horror movie villain, a serial killer in a doll's body who kills people with knives and guns. Robert, the doll's legend, is more subtle and psychological. Bad luck, curses, strange occurrences, objects moving. Robert doesn't jump out and stab people. His malevolence is quieter, more insidious, but both tap into the same primal fear, the fear that an inanimate object, particularly a childlike doll, could be alive and hostile. Don Mancini, creator of Child's Play, has never explicitly confirmed that Robert the Doll inspired Chucky. But in the 1980s, Robert's legend was already well known in horror circles and among paranormal enthusiasts. It's highly likely that Mancini was aware of Robert's story and drew inspiration from it, even if unconsciously. The idea of a cursed doll that comes to life is universal in horror folklore. But the specific details of Robert's story aligned remarkably well with Child's Play. Child's Play became a massive franchise, 7 films in the original series, plus a 2019 reboot, plus a TV series. Chucky became one of the most recognizable horror villains in cinema history, alongside Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, and Michael Myers. Brad Dourif's voice performance as Chucky is legendary. The catchphrase, "Hi, I'm Chucky, wanna play?" is instantly recognizable. But while Chucky is a fictional character, Robert the Doll is real, sitting in a museum in Key West, supposedly still watching, still causing trouble. Part 5. The Paranormal Investigations. Over the years, numerous paranormal investigators and television shows have examined Robert the Doll. Ghost Adventures, Most Haunted, Deadly Possessions, all have featured Robert in episodes. The results are always the same. Strange electronic malfunctions, investigators feeling uneasy, claims of EVP electronic voice phenomena capturing Robert's voice, psychics claiming to sense malevolent energy. In 2015, Robert was taken to Las Vegas to be featured on Zach Bagans' Deadly Possessions show, the first time the doll had left Key West in over 110 years. During the transportation and filming, crew members reported numerous technical difficulties and personal experiences. Cameras malfunctioned. People felt watched. Zach Bagans himself, who has investigated thousands of allegedly haunted locations, said Robert was one of the most unsettling objects he's ever encountered. Psychics who've examined Robert report different theories about the source of his power. Some say the doll was cursed by the Bahamian servant using voodoo or others say Gene Otto's intense childhood attachment to the doll created a psychic bond that gave it a form of sentience. Still others believe a malevolent spirit attached itself to the doll over the years, using it as a vessel. And of course, skeptics say it's all mass hysteria and suggestion that Robert is just an old doll and people are projecting their fears onto it. What's fascinating is the consistency of the reports. For over a century across multiple generations, people have reported the same types of experiences. With Robert, the feeling of being watched, electronic malfunctions, bad luck following their encounters, the sense that the doll is somehow aware and responsive. If this was purely mass hysteria or suggestion, you'd expect the reports to vary wildly or change with cultural trends. But they don't. The core experiences remain remarkably consistent. Today, Robert the Doll is one of the most visited attractions in Key West. Fort East Martello Museum receives tens of thousands of visitors each year specifically to see Robert. His case is the centerpiece of the museum. The letters keep coming, hundreds per year, from people all over the world begging for forgiveness or asking Robert to curse their enemies. The museum staff takes it seriously, cataloging the letters and maintaining the traditions around Robert. You can visit Robert yourself if you go to Key West. The museum is open to the public. You can stand in front of his case and ask permission to take a photo. You can read the letters from cursed visitors. You can leave offerings if you want. But the staff will warn you, be respectful. Don't mock him. Don't tap on the glass. And if you feel like he's saying no to photography, listen. Because the curse, whether real or psychological, is well documented. The artist house, where Eugene Otto lived with Robert, is now a bed and breakfast. You can stay in the turret room where Robert used to live. Guests have reported strange experiences, objects moving, footsteps in empty rooms, the feeling of being watched. The current owners embraced the legend, offering Robert-themed rooms and experiences. Key West has fully leaned into the Robert phenomenon. Ghost tours stop at the artist house, and the museum shops sell Robert merchandise, and local lore has enshrined him as Key West's most famous supernatural resident. Part 7. Skeptical analysis. So what's really going on with Robert the doll? Let's examine this from a skeptical perspective. The most logical explanation is that Robert is simply an old doll, and the legend has grown over time through storytelling, suggestion, and coincidence. Eugene Otto may have had psychological issues or an overactive imagination as a child. His attachment to the doll as an adult could be explained by autism spectrum traits, social anxiety, or other neurodivergent conditions that make people form strong attachments to objects. The two voices his parents heard could have been Eugene practicing ventriloquism or role-playing. Children often do this with toys, creating elaborate imaginary scenarios. The fact that Eugene continued into adulthood is unusual but not supernatural. Many adults have comfort objects or unusual attachments. The objects moving, the doll appearing in different positions, these could be memory errors. People moving things and forgetting, or Eugene himself moving the doll when others weren't looking. As for the modern curse reports, skeptics point to confirmation bias and the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. Bad things happen to everyone all the time. Car accidents, job losses, relationship problems, illnesses. These are normal parts of life. But when someone has visited Robert and been told about the curse, they're primed to attribute any subsequent misfortune to the doll. They remember the connection and write a letter. While thousands of other visitors who experienced no problems don't write letters because there's nothing to report. The electronic malfunctions can be explained by old wiring in the museum, electromagnetic interference, or the simple fact that batteries die and cameras malfunction regularly. We just notice it more when we've been told to expect it. The feeling of being watched is a common psychological phenomenon called the gaze detection response. We re-evolutionarily wired to feel like we're being observed, and when we're in a creepy environment expecting to feel that way, we do. All of this is rational and reasonable, and yet, the legend persists. The experiences continue, and something about Robert the doll unsettles even the most hardened skeptics who see him in person. There's something in those button eyes, that slight smirk, the way he's positioned in his case. Even if there's no supernatural explanation, Robert the doll has become a powerful psychological artifact, an object that has accumulated over a century of fear, belief, and story that makes him genuinely unnerving, regardless of whether he's actually haunted. Part 8. The psychology of haunted dolls. Why are dolls so terrifying? Why does the concept of a haunted doll resonate so deeply with people? Psychologically, it's about the uncanny valley, the unsettling feeling we get from things that are almost human but not quite. Dolls have human faces, human proportions, but they're lifeless. Our brains struggle with this contradiction. We're wired to see faces and interpret expressions. So when we look at a doll, part of our brain treats it as a person, but another part knows it's not alive, creating cognitive dissonance. Children's dolls are especially disturbing because they represent innocence and childhood, which makes any malevolence associated with them feel like a corruption of something pure. There's also the size factor. Child-sized objects that move or act independently are particularly unsettling because they violate our expectations. We expect small, childlike things to be helpless and controllable. When they're not, when they have agency and malevolent intent, it's psychologically threatening. Haunted doll legends tap into deep folklore traditions about objects that retain the essence of their owners or become vessels for spirits. In many cultures, personal objects, especially toys that were loved and cherished, are believed to retain psychic impressions or energy. The idea that a doll given to a child could become bound to that child's spirit or emotions is a universal concept in supernatural belief systems. Robert the doll specifically embodies all of these fears. He was handmade, not factory-produced, which makes him unique and personal. He was given under supposedly malicious circumstances. He was loved obsessively by Eugene Otto for decades, creating a strong personal connection. He's old, over 120 years old, which adds gravitas and history. And he has that face, those button eyes, and that slight, knowing expression that could be innocent or could be malevolent depending on how you look at him. Part 8. The psychology of haunted dolls. Why are dolls so terrifying? Why does the concept of a haunted doll resonate so deeply with people? Psychologically, it's about the uncanny valley, the unsettling feeling we get from things that are almost human but not quite. Dolls have human faces, human proportions, but they're lifeless. Our brains struggle with this contradiction. We're wired to see faces and interpret expressions, so when we look at a doll, part of our brain treats it as a person, but another part knows it's not alive, creating cognitive dissonance. Children's dolls are especially disturbing because they represent innocence and childhood, which makes any malevolence associated with them feel like a corruption of something pure. There's also the size factor. Child-sized objects that move or act independently are particularly unsettling because they violate our expectations. We expect small, childlike things to be helpless and controllable. When they're not, when they have agency and malevolent intent, it's psychologically threatening. Haunted doll legends tap into deep folklore traditions about objects that retain the essence of their owners or become vessels for spirits. In many cultures, personal objects, especially toys, that were loved and cherished, are believed to retain psychic impressions or energy. The idea that a doll given to a child could become bound to that child's spirit or emotions is a universal concept in supernatural belief systems. Robert the doll specifically embodies all of these fears. He was handmade, not factory-produced, which makes him unique and personal. He was given under supposedly malicious circumstances. He was loved obsessively by Eugene Otto for decades, creating a strong personal connection. He's old, over 120 years old, which adds gravitas and history. And he has that face, those button eyes, and that slight, knowing expression that could be innocent or could be malevolent, depending on how you look at him. Part 9. Other famous haunted dolls. Robert isn't the only famous haunted doll, though he's arguably the most famous in America. Let's briefly look at some others. Annabelle, the Raggedy Ann doll investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren and now in their occult museum, inspired her own horror franchise. The real Annabelle looks nothing like the creepy porcelain doll from the movies. She's a normal Raggedy Ann doll, which somehow makes her creepier. Mandy, a doll from 1910, is housed in the Quesnel Museum in British Columbia. She's a porcelain doll that allegedly caused poltergeist activity in the home where she was kept. The doll has a cracked head and haunting glass eyes. Museum staff report strange occurrences around her display. Okiku, a doll in Japan, supposedly has hair that continues to grow despite being over 100 years old. The doll is said to contain the spirit of a young girl who died in 1918. The family keeps the doll in a temple, and priests regularly trim its hair, which inexplicably keeps growing. Peggy, a doll in the UK, has become famous through the internet. Her owner claims that watching Peggy on video causes people to experience headaches, chest pains, and nightmares. Hundreds of people have reported feeling ill after seeing Peggy's image online. What all these dolls have in common is a consistent pattern of reported phenomena across multiple witnesses over time. While skeptics can explain away individual incidents, the sheer volume and consistency of reports is harder to dismiss entirely. Whether supernatural or psychological, these dolls have genuine effects on people. Part 10. Conclusion. What's the truth? So after all of this, what's the truth about Robert the doll? Is he genuinely haunted? Is he cursed? Or is he just an old toy with a great story? The honest answer is, we don't know. We can't know. The supernatural, by definition, can't be proven or disproven using scientific methods. What we can say with certainty is this: Robert the doll is a real object with a documented history spanning 120 years. Eugene Otto really existed and really kept this doll his entire life, treating it as if it were alive. Neighbors, family members, museum staff, and thousands of visitors have reported consistent experiences with the doll. Letters from cursed visitors are real and numerous. The legend has endured and grown across multiple generations. Whether there's a supernatural explanation or a psychological one, Robert the doll has power. He affects people, he unsettles them, he inspires fear and fascination, and he inspired one of the most successful horror franchises in cinema history with Chucky and Child S play. That cultural impact is real and measurable. If you ever find yourself in Key West, I encourage you to visit Robert. Stand in front of his case, look into those button eyes, ask permission to take a photo, read the letters from people begging forgiveness, and decide for yourself whether you believe. Just maybe be respectful while you do it. Because cursed or not, Robert has been watching visitors for decades, and according to hundreds of letters, he doesn't forget disrespect. The story of Robert the doll reminds us that sometimes the truth is less important than the story. Real or not, Robert represents something primal in human psychology, our fear of the uncanny, our belief that objects can be more than what they seem, and our need to find explanations for the unexplainable. He's a cultural artifact, a psychological phenomenon, and yes, possibly something supernatural. Whatever he is, he's unforgettable. So what do you think? Is Robert the doll genuinely haunted, or is it all suggestion and folklore? Would you visit him if you had the chance? And would you ask permission before taking a photo, just in case? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the true story behind Chucky, hit that like button, subscribe for more long-form true crime and paranormal content, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching. And remember, if you ever meet Robert, be respectful, just in case.